Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we extract the most compelling insights from our sources to bring you a clearer understanding of complex topics. And speaking of digging things up, what do you call a group of musical sheep?
Oh no, what?
A union orchestra. I'm Hari, and alongside me is Kimi. We're ready to explore the depths of history for you today.
Hello, I'm Kimi. And yes, prepared to delve into a really significant and frankly quite somber event in American history. We're looking at a specific battle from the Civil War, the Battle of Poison Spring, down in Arkansas.
Exactly. Today, we're taking a detailed look using the Battle of Poison Spring.pdf document as our guide. Our point really is to understand the lasting significance of this particular engagement. It happened April 18, 1864, Wachita County, Arkansas.
Why does it hold such a, well, tragic place in the state's history and the bigger picture of the war?
Right. And to really get a handle on Poison Spring, you have to see where it fits in the larger military context. This battle was actually part of the Camden expedition, which was itself meant to support the bigger Red River campaign, wasn't it? The Union push towards Freeport, Louisiana.
Precisely. Trying to grab Shreveport, control resources, maybe even open it way deeper into Confederate territory. But by early 64, things were looking pretty precarious for the Confederacy in Arkansas.
Yeah, the Union already held Little Rock, the capital, right, and most of the state north of the Arkansas River. So Confederate leaders had basically retreated southwest, a tough position strategically.
Definitely. And Major General Frederick Steele, the Union commander in Arkansas, he actually had serious doubts about this whole Camden expedition.
Mhm.
He was worried mostly about logistics, bad roads, keeping his troops supplied. Valid concerns, as it turned out.
And on the other side, Major General Sterling Price was leading the Confederates there. But a lot of his infantry had been sent off to Louisiana to deal with that Red River campaign push.
Leaving him mainly with cavalry, which changes how you can fight, obviously. And adding to the Union's problems, here's a grim little detail. Guerrilla warfare was rampant, and there were reports of partisans poisoning wells with dead animals. Nasty stuff.
Ugh, really grim. Okay, so what directly triggered the battle at Poison Spring?
Well, the immediate cause was a Union detachment sent out by Steele on April 17th. Their mission was critical. Forage for something like 5,000 bushels of corn near White Oak Creek. That was about 15 miles from their base in Camden. They were desperate for supplies.
And this detachment was led by Colonel James M. Williams. It included the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry Regiment, plus cavalry and artillery.
And that specific regiment, the 1st Kansas Colored, is really important here. It's a less-known fact, maybe, that these soldiers were largely formerly enslaved men from Arkansas and Missouri. Their presence was inflammatory.
Inflammatory is putting it mildly. There was huge Confederate resentment about the Union using black soldiers. Confederate leadership, like Lieutenant General E. Kirby Smith, had even said, basically, give no quarter to them or their white officers if captured.
It's chilling. It reflects this deep-seated dehumanization and fear about the social order changing.
And on top of that racial animosity, there was specific bad blood towards Kansas troops in general. They had a reputation, earned or not, for pretty extensive pillaging, so a volatile mix.
Absolutely. Now, this foraging party was quite large. Initially, about 630 soldiers escorting nearly 200 wagons. Then they got reinforced, bringing the total over 1,100 men.
Though reports say many were straggling, maybe looting themselves, which wouldn't have helped discipline. And of course, Confederate scouts knew they were out there.
They did. The Confederate response was led by Brigadier Generals John Marmaduke and Samuel Maxey. And they also had support from Choctaw Nation troops, which is another layer to this.
Right, showing the alliances involved. What was their plan?
Simple, but effective. Set up a roadblock to catch the Union column on its way back to Camden, weighed down with all that corn, and then hit them hard. Marmaduke set up the block. Maxey positioned his division for the attack.
Okay, so the trap is set. How did the battle unfold?
Well, the Confederates attacked. The first couple of assaults were actually beaten back by the Union troops. They put up a determined fight initially.
And eventually.
Eventually, a third, bigger Confederate push broke the Union line. It seems they found a weak spot, and things just collapsed. It turned into a rout.
And this is where it turns from a battle into something much darker, the massacre.
Yes. The Confederate victory was immediately followed by a systematic killing of the black soldiers from the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry. During the fighting, yes, but also after they were wounded or trying to surrender. It's often called the Poison Spring Massacre. Some say it's the worst massacre in Arkansas history during the war.
The numbers are stark. The Union lost 301 men overall, but the 1st Kansas Colored, 182 casualties. And get this, 117 killed versus only 65 wounded. That ratio is telling.
Extremely telling. It speaks volumes about what happened after the line broke. Confederate losses were much lower, maybe around 114 total, though exact numbers are always a bit fuzzy in these battles. Still, a huge disparity.
And the accounts of the brutality are just horrific. Reports of wagons being driven over wounded black soldiers, men being shot or bayoneted after they had fallen. Confederate leaders even hinted at the slaughter in their reports, using language that sort of acknowledged the scale of the killing without being too explicit.
There are also accounts, maybe less widely discussed, suggesting Choctaw troops were significantly involved in the atrocities. Claims of scalping, disturbing burials, just absolute barbarity.
Why such intense brutality? Was it just the general hatred towards black soldiers and Kansas troops, or something else?
It seems to be a mix. Certainly that deep-seated racial animosity, the resentment towards Kansas units, but maybe also an element of deliberate racial intimidation, sending a message. It's hard to definitively pin down the motivations for that level of violence, but those factors are surely key. And contemporary newspapers, both sides, really struggled with how to even report what happened.
A truly grim chapter. So what happened after this disaster for the Union?
Well, the defeat at Poison Spring and then another defeat just a week later at Marks Mills basically forced Steele to give up on Camden. He had to retreat his army back towards Little Rock. The whole expedition failed.
And there was a measure of revenge later, wasn't there, at the Battle of Jenkins Ferry?
Yes, men from the 2nd Kansas Colored Infantry were involved there, and reports suggest they gave little quarter, likely shouting, "Remember Poison Spring," the cycle of brutality.
Today, the site is preserved. Poison Springs Battleground State Park. It's part of the Camden Expedition Site's National Historic Landmark. Though some historians note the interpretation there has sometimes perhaps downplayed the, quote, dark deeds that occurred.
It's a difficult history to confront fully. But Poison Spring really stands as this stark example of the Civil War's brutality, especially when race was involved.
So, summing up our deep dive today, we've seen Poison Spring wasn't just a small battle, but a key part of the failed Camden expedition. We saw a vital foraging mission turn into a deadly ambush.
And critically, that ambush descend into a horrific massacre,
Yeah.
particularly targeting African-American soldiers, which really cements its tragic significance in the war's history.
Definitely. And perhaps a final thought for our listeners. Consider how events like Poison Spring force us to look beyond simple narratives of the Civil War and confront the really complex, often brutal realities, especially around race and how soldiers were treated or mistreated.
A sobering but important reflection.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.